For centuries, scholars and researchers have heard many legends centered on giants who once roamed our planet. From biblical tales to Native American folklore, cultures around our planet have distinct stories about an enormous race of people who once walked the earth. In this video, we'll look at the evidence supplied in ancient texts such as the Bible, as well as the legends recorded by Greeks and Native Americans that suggest giants once roamed the earth. We'll even look at the mysterious remains of gigantic skulls and skeletons that pop up everywhere, from North America to Europe and beyond. So, let's begin. Today on Earth, only one branch of humans makes up the entirety of Earth's population, and we call ourselves Homo sapiens. We are fairly diverse when it comes to culture and beliefs, and for the most part, we look fairly similar and have many of the same characteristics. But if we were to go back tens of thousands of years, we would observe fairly different hominids, such as the Neanderthals or Denisovians, both of which would look much different than modern humans if compared side by side. Homo Floresiensis are another extinct species of humans that once inhabited Flores, Indonesia. These people grew to be no more than 3.5 feet tall and are often considered the smallest subspecies of humans. Considering this, is it possible that a race of humans existed at the other end of the spectrum, a race of people who would be considered giants in modern terms? If so, this greatly aligns with the legends and folklore from every corner of the earth, suggesting a race of giants once roamed the earth. While giants are often considered to be no more than figures of our imagination, legends have been passed down from generation to generation, suggesting that a race of giants did once roam the earth. In some cases, they came as wise and intelligent beings who helped push humanity towards a more enlightened and harmonious state, whereas in other tales, they are portrayed as warlike creatures who killed everything in their path and even practiced cannibalism. In these sources, they are referred to as the Nephilim, the offspring of a group of angels known as the Watchers. The Watchers are referred to as the sons of God in many sources. However, it's said that they went against God's will and committed various sins and thus were banished to Earth. The deed that forced them to remain on Earth was their lust for the women of our planet, with whom they eventually had children, creating a race of giants. This legend brings us to a tale we are all familiar with, the flood of Noah. Legend has it that God decided to flood the earth to rid it of these rogue giants who had become evil and cannibalistic. However, not all the giants perished in the flood, as a few survived and carried on the bloodline. Goliath, a giant Philistine warrior who stood over 9 feet tall, is one such being with ancestry that links him back to the Nephilim. Many scholars have interpreted his existence as scholarly proof that a race of giants existed during ancient times. Is all of this sounding a little familiar? Maybe you were a giant in a past life. If you want to find out more about your ancient ancestors, subscribe to Magma Storm. Similarly, if we move on to later Greek mythology, their legends and tales are littered with references to giants. One such group of people was known as the Gigantes, a race of large beings who were born from the blood of the castrated Uranus. A recurring theme throughout the art of ancient Greece was a depiction of the legendary battle known as the Gigantomachia, which was waged between the gods of Greece and the race of Gigantes. While many of the legends and stories are often interpreted as nothing more than symbolic teachings, the root of the stories may have actually been inspired by a race of giants that once existed. During the Greco-Roman era, various prominent scholars, historians, and valued members of society made reference to giants living in and around the Mediterranean. Pliny the Elder, an author who lived in ancient Rome, wrote about a giant known as Gabarus. The skeleton of Gabarus was supposedly on display in ancient Rome, and Pliny records that the height of this giant was 33.5 feet. This would make his remains one of the largest recorded giants ever. Another famous historian of the era who recorded the existence of giants was Herodotus. He documented the existence of a race of giants that lived in North Africa. Herodotus called this group of giants the Garamantes. While many of these ancient reports should be taken with a pinch of salt, one can't help but question whether or not most of these legends were based on the idea that our ancestors once came into contact with a race of giants. The existence of of giants has remained a popular topic in writing for over 2,000 years. It wasn't solely reserved for folklore or legends, as even some of the most influential minds of the era had their say on the subject. Having renowned historians prompts us to believe that the concept of giants was both a widespread idea and one that held some level of credibility in the ancient world. Legends of giants are not only found in ancient Europe, Africa, and Asia, but also in North and South America. Various native peoples of the Americas speak of giants who once lived in and around their neighboring territories. The Choctaw, a tribe that lives in what is now Tennessee, speaks of a race of giants known as the Nahalo. The legend recalls a race of giants their ancestors fought with when they arrived in Mississippi during their great migration from the west. Nahalo came to be the word used to describe white people. However, it originated as a name for a giant white race who were said to be cannibalistic. The Comanches are another Native American people who speak of a race of somewhat civilized city-dwelling giants that once thrived in North America. Chief Rolling Thunder said the following in 1857, "Innumerable moons ago, a race of white men, 10 feet high and more rich and powerful than any white man now living here, inhabited a large range of country extending from the rising to the setting sun. Their fortifications crowned the summits of the mountains, protecting their populous cities situated in the intervening valleys." While the oral legends of giants passed down through Native American lineages are rather compelling, the most famous of all the Native American legends is that recorded by the descendants of the Paiutes. This tribe once lived in parts of Nevada. The Paiutes have a legend they told to the early settlers of the area that a long time ago, red-haired giants, whom they referred to as the Sitica, were at war with their ancestors. These giants were said to range in height from 7 to over 10 feet tall and were described by the Paiutes as a vicious and cannibalistic people. The ancestors of the Paiutes passed down a legend of a great battle that once took place between them and the giants, which resulted in the extermination of the red-haired cannibals at a site now known as Lovelock Cave. The Paiutes say that they chased the remainder of these vicious giants into the cave, blocked the entrance, and set the site ablaze. Excavations in this cave during the 20th century may have proved that the legends were in fact true. Archaeologists working in the cave noticed that the ceiling was black and burned, suggesting that the legend of a great fire was true. On top of this, thousands of artifacts were found within the cave, and rumors suggest that 2 mummified red-haired giants, close to 7 feet tall, were also recovered during the initial excavations. But for all of the evidence that may have existed during the 19th and 20th centuries, none of this is available today, and the whereabouts of the skeletons remain a mystery to independent researchers. So, while similar legends from various independent sources may not give us concrete proof that giants did, in fact, exist, we do have evidence of giants in our modern era. There are various people who were born in the 16th and 17th centuries who were of an enormous size. One man known as Charles Byrne rose to reach nearly 8 feet, whereas Anna Swan was a woman who was over 7 feet tall. These unusually tall individuals were not alone, and from time to time, we would hear about various other individuals who were as tall as them. This places the idea of giants existing in the realm of possibility, albeit the height of modern giants is often attributed to medical conditions such as gigantism. It still gives us enough credible evidence to suggest that a species of humans can grow to substantial heights and allows us to keep the idea alive. But is there any actual concrete proof that a race of giants once roamed the earth? Well, we might just find some in archaeological reports of the early 19th and 20th centuries. For the past 200 to 300 years, various reports from archaeologists and scholars have referred to the remains of giants found from North America to France. For instance, towards the end of the 19th century, a 10-foot-tall skeleton was discovered in Castelnau-les-Lez, France. The remains became widely known as the Giant of Castelnau and were examined by a French anthropologist. He suggested that the individual may have been a race of giant humans that once roamed Western Europe. During the same era, hundreds of newspaper articles began writing about giant skeletons that were being recovered from the hundreds of mounds that lay scattered across North America. The remains discovered in these mountains range in height from 7 to 9 feet tall, with some even stating that the skeletons recovered are over 12 feet tall. These finds often spark a great debate among archaeologists, scholars, and the general public. Unfortunately, many of these discoveries lack the authentic paperwork and necessary documentation that we see in modern archaeology. Thus, many of these discoveries have been debunked or simply labeled misinterpretations. However, despite the skepticism surrounding many of these reports, there are scholars and archaeologists who give some level of credibility to the idea of giants. This has continued to fuel speculation on the idea that a race of giants did, in fact, once exist. The most compelling pieces of evidence to suggest giants once roamed the earth comes from the discovery of large remains such as skulls. This has created considerable interest from scholars willing to debate the idea with their hesitant counterparts. While some of these remains have been debunked as fake or simply revealed to be the bones of large animals, others have seen the skulls and skeletons in person and have claimed that, without a doubt, these were the bones of human beings. One such find takes us back to the Lovelock Cave of Nevada, where the Paiutes say that the Sitka met their doom. Within this cave, a team of archaeologists led by M.R. Harrington and Lolene Loden recovered several skulls of a large proportion. This has led many to suggest that this was in fact an area in which a race of giants lived. However, skeptics have claimed that the bones merely represent a few abnormally large individuals rather than a race of giants that once existed in the area. Another interesting example can be found 72 miles north of the Lovelock Cave, where the bones of a prehistoric giant were discovered and written about in a Nevada newspaper. A segment from the Sunday Morning Herald in 1904 read as follows: "Workmen engaged in digging gravel here today uncovered at a depth of about 12 feet a lot of bones that were once part of the skeleton of a gigantic human being. The bones were taken to Dr. Samuels, who examined them thoroughly and pronounced them to be the bones of a man who must have been nearly 11 feet in height." As well as the various disputed cases of giant skeletons discovered throughout the Americas and Europe, there are other very well documented examples of extremely large human remains that are hard to dismiss. One such example was discovered on the island of Java. This giant skeleton is now referred to as the Meganthropus. The remains of this giant skeleton were discovered in 1941 by a Dutch paleontologist. Gustav Heinrich Ralph von Koningsveld recovered several large hominid teeth and jaw fragments that were much larger than anatomically modern humans. These remains are now attributed to an extinct race of hominoids, whom some researchers believe are a giant relative to our species. Various scholars and archaeologists have begun questioning whether or not a branch of archaeology has deliberately hidden or suppressed many of these remains. One such institution that has been accused is the Smithsonian Institution in America. The Smithsonian is the world's largest museum, education, and research complex, and for just under 200 years, they have written about various archaeological sites and excavations across America. Contained with many of their old newspapers, one can find hundreds, if not thousands, of reports on the discovery of giant skeletons throughout the various mounds in the central part of North America. In their annual reports, Smithsonian scientists have identified at least 17 skeletons that stood over 7 feet. Another example was recorded at over 8 feet tall, with a skull that had a circumference of 36 inches. To put this into perspective, the average human has a skull with a circumference of around 20 inches. This discovery was made in Anna, Illinois, and published in the Smithsonian Annual Report of 1873. Is it possible that fragmented pieces of proof that giants did once exist are hidden away in the storerooms and warehouses of certain archaeological institutions? And is this because they are still not ready to accept the theory that a race of giants did in fact once roam through North America and the world? While this may seem like an unusual idea, as why would archaeologists want to suppress information in their own field, one only needs to examine the Clover First hypothesis to answer this question. The Clover First hypothesis suggests that no human existed on the continent of North America until around 13,000 years ago. This issue was bitterly argued against for decades during the middle of the 20th century, and many archaeologists even lost their funding by simply protesting this idea. However, the clover hypothesis was finally debunked during the latter part of the 20th century. Now archaeologists are well aware that people have likely lived on the North American continent for hundreds of thousands of years. So, if we give it enough time, will we slowly begin to see a shift in the mindset of archaeologists as evidence becomes increasingly apparent that a race of giants once did roam our Earth? So, combining all the information contained within this video, it's safe to say that throughout the history of Earth, there have been extraordinarily large beings across a broad range of hominid species. It's possible that smaller Homo sapiens may have come into contact with much larger subspecies of humans, such as Homo heidelbergensis or the Megathropus of Java. This may have been the basis of the legends and tales of giants, simply because these species were much larger than their Homo sapien counterparts. However, they wouldn't be considered giants when compared to modern standards. But on the other hand, maybe many of these other legends are true, from biblical tales of the Nephilim to the Setica of Native American myths, or the giants in the stories of Greek writers such as Pliny and Herodotus. It's clear that legends of giants who were over 10 feet tall have existed for thousands of years. And as the great Carl Jung once said, all myths and legends have their basis in reality. And that's the end of our video on the giants who once roamed the Earth. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to Magmastorm if you'd like to see more videos like this on ancient history.